So tell me about body theology.
Yeah, let's see if I can distill it. I grew up with a dance background and a movement background. I danced professionally in Chicago for about 4.5 years. And along the way, I started noticing ideologies about the body. I'll say that first in the secular world about how, women should behave, how men's bodies should look, how people of color should look, right? All these things. And then when I got into seminary, I thought about, okay, how can I integrate all this knowledge that I've accumulated about the body into the spiritual path that I'm on? And for a long time, people are like, oh, lead the dance ministry at church.
Right.
So
right.
I did that, I guess, for a little bit, and I've done dance in the church. But really, for me, it was a deeper thing about, like, what theological beliefs do we actually hold about the body? We say a lot about the body. We talk about embodied theology, but what do we really believe about God and our bodies? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the ongoing conversation I'm having.
What do you notice in terms of kind of mainstream? Because even if we don't articulate a body theology or theology of the body,
Yes.
we have one.
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
So what is the mainstream theology of the body that you are trying to expand the definition of?
Yeah, or push back
Or
against
push back-
maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You tell me, yeah.
Yeah, that there is a right, white, heteronormative way to be in the world. And that, a good body is able-bodied according to certain cultures. It sits up straight. It, can run a certain distance. If it's masculine, it's masculine a certain way. If it's feminine, so lots of little things, and then lots of little isms about how you should move and shouldn't move. So there's things about the body, and then coming from a movement perspective, I've noticed about ways you should and shouldn't move. Even posture. People, they have good posture. But where does that come from? I don't think we ever asked. We think it's scientific, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's the way we've been raised about how the body should hold
So
itself.
glad to hear you say that. I am a sloucher, and I've always felt bad about it, and now I'm going to decide that science says otherwise.
But, the teacher I studied with in Chicago said, talked a lot about, what are the natural ways of holding the body. So he studied animal movements a lot, how our body reacts in stress, anger, love, happiness. And so what we do is we take kind of the natural thing and we say, no, bad, and we, pull it up and away from the earth. We lift our chest. We hold ourselves this certain way. We have all these choreographed ways of doing things that actually end up hurting us. I think psychosomatically and also, physically.
Yeah.
So he tried to break some of those down, and I'm trying to do that in the church as well.
So talk about that. Talk about breaking those down in the church context.
I think one way is breaking down, especially around gender. That's a big thing for me because I present as female and identify as female, is what I should and shouldn't wear, how my body should move in the pulpit and how it shouldn't, and giving women the freedom to, move their bodies in certain ways, to hold their bodies a certain way, to wear certain things and not be so upset or uncomfortable. So that's a little bit. And then also to bring movement into the church that's not just limited or relegated to the pulpit, to the pews, or to a liturgical dance choir if you happen to have one.
Right.
Because right now those are the three ways that you can appropriately move, and there's really nothing in between.
See, it's funny. I've often talked about, so you're at McCormick. I'm a Presbyterian. So I say that Presbyterians could do a 3-day liturgical dance a festival and never leave their seats. Right. We could talk about how to be in liturgical dance.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what are so even though liturgical dance is still kind of segmented off, it's like those people doing that thing. It's the choir does the singing, and then the dancers do the dancing, and we do the sitting and appreciating.
Yes.
So how do we encourage people, how do you encourage folk to engage the goodness of the bodies they have been given?
Sometimes I've done it in sermons. When I preach sermons, I get people up and moving. I have them do exercises together, similar to one we did in a workshop today. I also think we did something at my own church, which wasn't originated from me, but I think is great, is moving prayer. In Prayers of the People, we actually had movements for people to do when they, did the call and response. I think we could put it more into our liturgy. Even in the ways we start service, how we invoke the Spirit. And it's hard because I come from a white church context where it's, movement is very segmented. Now we get up and sway side to side to sing this hymn,
You have to choreograph it in order to do it.
Yes, you have to think about it and choreograph it. And so how can we also learn lessons from churches outside of our context without co-opting or codifying? I think will also be helpful.
let's get to the root of the theology of it. So
Yeah.
what is your theology of the body? What is your theology of movement?
I mean, at its root is that the body is good just the way it is, and that it's sacred just the way it is, and that it has a thinking, I call it the thinking body. Well, I didn't originate that phrase, but that phrase, the thinking body, is that it has a knowledge all of its own. And that it's sacred and holy just the way it is, and nothing needs to be done to it or about it. And that the urges of the body are not sacred. So that's at the very core for me. And that bleeds into everything about, being sex positive. That bleeds into being, reading the Bible from different perspectives: feminist, womanist, queer, abled and not abled. And that means talking about the body in ways that we're not used to talking about it, because we're sitting up here and we're talking about things this way.
Yeah.
And I think also at the root is an experiential theology, because what's different about the body than the mind is that we experience things in our bodies,
Right.
and sometimes we can't put words to them. So this theology comes from a place of like, what was it like when you went through this thing? Like, where was God in your body at that moment? And helping people find words to flesh that out. Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about sex positive? Because I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of assumptions about it.
Yes.
About what that means, and how would you define that?
Yeah. And sidebar, there's a lot of great workshops here about that. So people should definitely, I'll give just a very brief nugget,
Yeah.
but we have a politics of how sex should be, a politics of respectability. So it should be under all of these layers. We think, okay, it should be between a husband and wife, heteronormative. It should be within marriage. And so sex positivity expands that definition to say sexuality is this beautiful, holy, sacred thing that involves the body, and it has so many expressions outside of those things, and that we shouldn't have any shame around it. That has caused so much damage, myself included, that you feel a lot of shame around the body's urges and what it wants to do and express and feel. So sex positivity says, let's unpeel this onion and let's expand the tent to include all of these things. Yeah.
There also seems to me to be a necessary tension with conversations around power in sex. Do you think that's fair?
Absolutely. Even I was in a sex and intimacy workshop here at the Goose, and even then the conversation was still framed in a heteronormative way about, females and males, which is an important conversation to have.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was still in that frame. So I think that all bleeds together with the body, because certain bodies have more power than others, and certain bodies are safer than others. As a female body, my body is not safe in some contexts, but as a white body, it is safe in some contexts. Right. So talking about the intersectional play of those things too is important.
I'm curious, with your background in dance, can you think of a time where dance was your church or was sacred?
Yes.
In a way that wasn't maybe recognized as such?
100%. The company I was with, Jump Rhythm Jazz Project, it's jazz, rhythm, tap, body, percussion, dance theater company in Chicago. The time I was there, I think, did the most for me spiritually, even though it was a secular company. And I have written about this extensively because even the artistic director is like, I'm an atheist, very secular. And even I've come to help him realize how sacred it really is, because we did this kind of work. So every day we came into the studio and we said, what tension patterns am I holding in my body that are not natural and that are not real, if that's right, that have been put on me by society, and then also helping express emotion authentically through the body, through a relaxed, if I can use the word, animalistic body. And that takes a lot of emotional homework and a lot of work to just undo habit patterns that have been drilled into you over and over. As a woman, to hold my stomach in or lift my chest or do these things.
Right.
And you can't authentically express energy when you have stuff put on top.
You've got all these external narratives that are controlling what you do.
Absolutely.
And how you move.
So undoing all of that and going through all that work in community with other people and in relationship to the earth was the most spiritual work I've almost ever done. And I tell him that all the time.
What do you see in terms of being at the Goose? I don't know, is this your first time you've been here before? Second time, okay. So how does what you're doing intersect with the world of the Goose?
Yeah, when I first came into applying to speak or do a workshop, I thought, well, I don't know, like if this really is, maybe I should just do a dance workshop and like keep it safe. But the more I got closer to it, I was like, no, I think we need to have a conversation about the colonization that's been put on our bodies. Because the Goose does great work of decolonizing worship and church and activism, and there's some pieces in there about the body, but I hadn't heard that voice as strongly.
Right.
And actually now coming here, there's so many workshops about this as well, in various forms, either whether it has to do with sex and intimacy, whether it has to do with communion in the body. So it's clearly like the Holy Ghost is moving, because multiple people had this thought. I didn't recognize it as much in previous years.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
there's kind of a new awakening in that area.
I hope so.
That's cool.
Yeah, I hope so.
It's been interesting to me. I've been exploring theater over the last couple of years, and the realization of how much of our lives is lived in our body, and yet, particularly in the Presbyterian world, we do a lot of it up here
Yes.
and with our mouths
Yeah.
without recognizing that it's a whole body experience, that living is
Right.
a whole body experience.
Yes, and theological things that I've held on to as true for so long, sometimes when something hits me in my body, it's like, that thing isn't true. This is true. Yeah.
If you had a charge for people that you have learned, a piece of wisdom advice for people about living a more integrated sense of body and theology, what would it be?
I'd ask people to just take a moment anytime you have any kind of emotional experience or spiritual experience, or even thinking experience, and like check in with what's going on with your body. So to just stop and like do a mental scan, like where are you holding tension, where are you not, are you breathing, are you not breathing, where are you relaxed, and where do you feel trauma if there is any. So just to do a mental check-in all the time, and then try and build spiritual practices around that to help either further the joy you feel in your body or lessen the trauma that you might be feeling.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for having me.
All right.